Whenever I see a picture of Ann B. Davis in character as Alice on the classic TV show The Brady Bunch, I am immediately taken back to watching the show in reruns during the 70s. While Alice was without doubt the funniest character on the show, she always seemed to me like she was one of the kindest as well. So why am I talking about Ann B. Davis today? That's because I just finished listening to the latest episode of the Real Brady Brothers podcast, which is hosted by Barry Williams and Christopher Knight. In this particular podcast, they talk about a Season 3 episode of the Brady Bunch titled Sergeant Emma, where Ann gets to play the role of Alice's identical cousin Emma, who takes care of the Brady household while she goes on vacation. Sergeant Emma is a really fun episode that allows Ann to shine, but that was never hard for her to do in the first place. As both Christopher and Barry point out in the podcast, Ann was already an award-winning actress who was well known to television audiences due to her co-starring role as Schultze on The Bob Cummings Show. During the course of this episode of the podcast, both of the Real Brady Brothers take time to share their memories of Ann while they worked with her on The Brady Bunch. Barry recalled that he got along well with Ann, perhaps because he was a bit older than the rest of the kids in the cast, and he was able to relate to her differently because of that. He also mentioned that he remembered watching Ann on The Bob Cummings Show as a child, and as such, he knew that Ann was coming to the Brady Bunch as perhaps the most respected member of the cast. He also said that while on set, Ann was very much a professional and tended to minimize her interactions with the kids. Christopher's experiences with Ann were more of the latter. He said that Ann could be demanding when it came to all cast members, including the kids. Knowing their lines and their marks was important to her. It wasn't that she was mean, cantankerous, or difficult to work with in any way. It's just that she had high expectations of her work colleagues. And the same high expectations, well, she held herself to them as well. So I think it's fair to say that Ann did like the kids in the cast. But that doesn't mean that they were all that familial with her. Both Christopher and Barry during the podcast acknowledged the same thing that was written last year in an article by Taylor Cunningham that said that while Ann was a very nice woman, she didn't have any children of her own, and as such she struggled to relate with them. And that, perhaps more than anything else, just goes to demonstrate how talented Ann was as an actress. On The Brady Bunch, she made her affinity for the children seem so real, so genuine. It was hard for me not to believe that when the cameras weren't rolling, she wasn't exactly the same way. One thing that I got from the podcast episode was that both Christopher and Barry were in total awe of this woman and the talent that she brought day in and day out to the screen. Sadly, Ann left us a few years back. She was 88 when she took a fall in her home and never regained consciousness. Upon hearing news of her passing, many of the Brady cast members took the time to acknowledge the tremendous influence that this woman had directly and indirectly on their lives. For someone who never truly felt comfortable around kids, this lady sure was loved. Alright folks, time for a quick trivia break. According to Christopher Knight and Barry Williams, what nickname did the kids have for Ann? Was it A. Alley Cat, B. Annie B, C. Malice, or D. Schultze? If you answered B. Annie B, you got it right. Incidentally, the B stood for Bradford, which was Ann B. Davis's middle name. This is a great picture. The way that Ann is looking at the Brady kids, well, it just warms the heart. Yep, I know she's acting. Gosh darn it, she was good. Speaking of great actors, you know Robert Reed wasn't half bad himself. Here's a video about him that I think you're going to enjoy. Go ahead and click on it. I'm pretty much done here. Thank you so much for watching.